Okay, buckle up, because today we're diving into the fascinating world of life expectancy.
Oh, this is going to be good.
You sent over this really interesting Wikipedia article,
Yeah.
and I gotta say, I'm ready to unpack it all.
Yeah.
Like, how did we go from our ancestors
Uh,
barely making it past 30
right.
to worrying about, like, funding retirement for decades?
It really makes you think, about how much things have changed, even in just a few generations. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine what everyday life was like when hitting 30 basically made you ancient history.
Right.
So, to kick things off, let's rewind all the way back to the Paleolithic era.
Okay.
Because we got to start somewhere, right?
Perfect place to start.
Hmm.
Picture this. You're in the Paleolithic era. Life. Not exactly a picnic, right?
Right.
Stuck in survival mode and a life expectancy of, get this, 22 to 33 years old.
Oh, wow.
That's right. Hitting your teens.
Yeah.
You're practically middle-aged.
Yeah.
Tough crowd.
Right, Brock. I thought high school was rough. So, if life expectancy was so low back then, were there even any older people? Like, was everyone basically a kid?
That's a really common misconception, actually. It's easy to think that way, but think about it this way. Imagine you're in a classroom, and the average test score is, say, 70%.
Okay.
Now, some students might have totally bombed, like 50%.
Yeah.
But others aced it, 90%, or even higher.
Right.
It all averages out. Life expectancy is similar. You might have a lower average, but some folks lived way past that.
Right. Makes sense.
It's just that infant and child mortality, sadly, that really brought that number down back then.
Oh, for sure. It's easy to forget how much those early years factor into the average, you know.
It's like,
Okay. So let's fast forward a bit. Togas and gladiators. Ancient Rome things were surely a bit better there, right?
definitely a step up. Say you were lucky enough to be living it up in ancient Rome.
Okay.
You managed to hit the ripe old age of 20. Congratulations, my friend. You could look forward to, on average, another 30 years. Still not exactly a modern retirement plan, but hey, it's progress, right?
Baby steps, right?
Gacked.
Okay. Fast forwarding a bit more. What about early modern Britain? What was life expectancy like across the pond?
Good question. You're looking at an average of, say, 33 to 40 years old.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
There's this weird blip in the 1720s.
Okay.
Life expectancy in Britain takes a nosedive down to 25 years.
What?
Crazy, right? Imagine living through whatever caused that.
Oh, I know, right? That's a huge drop. Makes you really appreciate modern medicine and sanitation.
For sure.
But okay, now for a real head scratcher. This article mentions something about, get this, pre-Champlain Canadian Maritimes.
Interesting.
And people were living past 100.
Right. Isn't that wild?
What's the deal with that?
I know, right? It's true, though. There are accounts from back then of people in the pre-Champlain Canadian Maritimes, and they're living well into their hundreds. Historians think it was probably because of, well, two main things. One, low stress levels.
Makes sense.
And two, their diet. We're talking super healthy stuff, lean meats, veggies galore, basically the paleo diet before it was cool.
So maybe our ancestors were onto something with that whole hunter-gatherer thing.
Right.
Living past 100 on lean meats and veggies. Sounds like a pretty good retirement plan to me.
Sign me up.
All right, last stop on our historical tour, 19th century England. I'm guessing this is where we see more, I don't know, like a bigger jump in life expectancy.
You bet. The 19th century. Total game changer. Yeah, the 19th century was when things really started to change. We're talking about a time when life expectancy in England jumped from 36 to 41 years old.
Wow, that's huge. What made such a big difference?
It was the dawn of public health measures. Think sanitation, disease prevention, things we take for granted now.
Oh, right. Like those grim statistics we talked about earlier from early modern Britain.
Exactly. Public health initiatives really started to turn the tide.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It really puts into perspective how important those advancements were and still are.
Okay.
But after centuries of change, what's the life expectancy situation look like around the world today?
Well, in 2019, before the pandemic kind of shook things up, the global average life expectancy was 73.3 years.
Okay.
But just like back in the day, where you live makes a huge difference.
Right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows everywhere.
Unfortunately not. In 2019, Japan was leading the pack 82.6 years.
Wow.
On the flip side, Eswatini, which used to be called Swaziland, had a life expectancy between 30 and 40 years.
Wow, that is a huge difference. It's kind of mind-boggling, really, when you think about it. Why such a big gap? Is it all about access to healthcare, or are there other things at play?
Healthcare is a big piece of the puzzle, no doubt. But it's not the whole story. Remember how we talked about 19th century England and those public health initiatives?
Yeah.
Well, those are still crucial today. Things like having clean water, sanitation, vaccines, those make a world of difference.
Hmm.
And we can't forget about diet. What you eat plays a huge role in your health and how long you live.
Right. It all comes back to those lifestyle factors. It really makes you stop and think about the choices we make every day. Speaking of which, were there any big global events besides public health initiatives that that really impacted life expectancy?
Definitely. The HIV/AIDS pandemic in Africa, for example, had a devastating impact on life expectancy in many countries.
Yeah.
And of course, more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic hit global life expectancy pretty hard.
Right.
It basically wiped out almost a decade of progress in some places. It really shows just how fragile those gains can be, you know?
Yeah. It's a sobering thought. But let's shift gears a bit. This article mentioned something about a gender gap in life expectancy.
Sure.
Are we really seeing women outliving men, or is that just an old wives' tale?
It's not a tale, it's a trend. Women generally do tend to live longer than men, and researchers have a few theories as to why.
Okay, I'm all ears. Spill the tea.
Well, historically, it's been linked to lifestyle choices. Men, for whatever reason, have been more likely to smoke, drink more alcohol, engage in a few more risky behaviors, all things that can contribute to a shorter lifespan.
That makes sense, but it can't just be about bad habits, right? There's got to be more to it.
Right. There's the biological angle, too. Women might have a slightly stronger resistance to infections and some diseases.
Oh, interesting.
And then there's the whole world of genetics, which gets really fascinating. Ever heard of the unguarded X hypothesis?
The what now? That sounds pretty intense. You're going to have to break that one down for me.
Okay, so picture this. Your genes are like a set of instructions, right? And chromosomes are like those folders they come in. Men have one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. Women have two X chromosomes.
Okay, following.
The unguarded X idea suggests that having two X chromosomes might give women an advantage.
How so?
Well, if one X chromosome has a faulty gene, the other X chromosome might have a good copy that can step in, like a backup.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Like having a safety net for your genes. Pretty cool.
Right.
This article also mentioned something about mutations in our cells. What's that all about?
You're talking about mitochondrial mutations. So mitochondria are like tiny powerhouses in our cells. They have their own DNA that we inherit directly from our mothers.
Okay.
And sometimes these mitochondrial genes can have tiny changes or mutations that might impact how long we live. Interestingly, these mutations seem to affect men more than women.
Wow. So it's this whole mix of factors, from lifestyle choices to biological differences and even these tiny mutations we get from our moms. Seems like women might just have a slight edge in the longevity department.
Maybe so.
But what about things like education and income? Do those factor into the life expectancy equation?
Absolutely. Studies have shown a strong link between higher education levels and longer lifespans.
Right, because more education usually translates to better jobs, higher income, maybe better healthcare and resources too, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about being able to afford good healthcare. People with more education tend to be more informed about health. They might be more likely to exercise, eat a balanced diet, and avoid things that are bad for them.
So knowledge really is power when it comes to living a longer, healthier life. But zooming out a bit, does a country's wealth and how that wealth is spread around, does that affect life expectancy?
Great question. And the answer is yes. There's definitely a link between income inequality and how long people live. Countries where the wealth is spread out more evenly, less income inequality, tend to have higher life expectancies overall.
Well, it's not just about being wealthy as an individual, but about building a society where everyone has the chance to thrive. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
What about where you live, like within a city? Does that even matter?
Believe it or not, even within the same city, life expectancy can be totally different in different neighborhoods.
Really?
Oh, yeah. A lot of times, it boils down to differences in income levels. We're talking about those long-term effects of poverty, lack of access to healthy food, not enough green spaces. All those factors add up.
Right. It all takes a toll in the long run.
Exactly. In some American cities, there's as much as a 20-year difference in life expectancy between wealthier and poorer neighborhoods.
Wow, 20 years. That's incredible.
Right. It really highlights how your zip code can be just as important as your genetic code when it comes to health and how long you live.
That's wild. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it, all these different factors, from our genes to where we live, all playing a role in how long we live.
It really is fascinating. It's like this complex dance between nature and nurture. But at the end of the day, it's not just about adding more years to our lives, right?
Exactly.
It's about making those years count.
You took the words right out of my mouth. We've been talking a lot about life expectancy, but what about health span?
Hmm.
Living longer is great and all, but not if it means spending those extra years battling health problems.
Right, that's the million-dollar question. And researchers are all over it trying to figure out not just how to help us live longer, but how to make those years healthy and vibrant.
Okay, so what are the secrets? What can we do to live longer and healthier?
Well, a lot of it comes back to those lifestyle choices we talked about earlier.
Right.
What you eat, how much you move, how you manage stress, those all have a huge impact on how well you age. And there's some really exciting research happening at the cellular level. Scientists are looking for ways to slow down or even reverse those tiny changes in our cells that contribute to aging.
So we're talking about potentially extending not just our lifespan, but our health span too. That's amazing.
It is pretty amazing, but it also brings up a whole bunch of other questions like, imagine a world where living to 100 or even 120 in good health is the norm. How would that change
Right,
things?
that's a whole other conversation.
Exactly. Everything from our healthcare systems to our economies, even our relationships, it would all be different.
It's a lot to think about. I guess it just goes to show that life expectancy isn't just some boring statistic.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of who we are, where we've been, and where we might be headed.
Perfectly said.
So for everyone listening, I think the big takeaway here is this. Life expectancy is about way more than just how many candles are on your birthday cake. It's about understanding all those things that shape our lives and realizing that we have more control over those things than we might think.
Absolutely. It's about making choices every single day that support a longer A&D healthier life, a life that's actually worth living.
Love that. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. If you could add 10 healthy years to your life, what would you do at that time? Something to think about. Because who knows, maybe the choices you make today will help make those extra years a reality. Until next time, keep on diving deep.